Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
It's 10 o'clock.
Hello, I'm Pia Chattopadhyay.
And I'm Chris Howden. Coming up on As It Happens, germ warfare. In South Dakota, the governor wants it to be business as usual. But after a coronavirus outbreak in the city of Sioux Falls, local politicians are testing their own power to shut things down. For weeks, South Dakota was relatively isolated from the pandemic moving around the world. But that changed last week after an outbreak at a pork processing plant in Sioux Falls. As of today, more than 300 workers there have tested positive for COVID-19. And while the plant has shut its doors, the state is still very much open for business. South Dakota's Governor, Kristi Noem, has so far refused to issue an order to keep people at home. That's not sitting well with local officials, including Pat Starr. He's a city councilor in Sioux Falls, and that's where we reached him.
Councillor Starr, earlier this month, Governor Kristi Noem told reporters that South Dakota is not New York City. But this past week, we have seen a cluster of coronavirus cases emerge in your South Dakota city. So how would you describe the situation in Sioux Falls?
Well, the first thing more than anything is that we always remind people not to panic. Both of our hospitals in our city are well in control, and we're able to help the people coming to both facilities. But we are seeing a rapid spike in the number of positive cases, and we are still not testing enough. And so I think potentially the numbers out there could be a lot higher.
And what has it been like to watch those numbers spike over the past week?
It's scary, and it does remind us that we need to follow the guidelines from the CDC. We need to wash our hands and do those things. But at the same time, we need to be a little bit scared. A little bit of fear is not a bad thing to get us where we need to be, to do the right things and to shelter in place.
You and others in your city are calling on the governor to now enact shelter-at-home orders. Why do you want that to happen?
Well, I think the last thing we want is our healthcare providers, our two hospitals, to become overwhelmed where they cannot help people who need that care. There are going to be a number of people who don't survive this virus, but my biggest fear is that the people who could normally be helped in a normal situation in a healthcare facility aren't going to be able to get the care that they need because the system is totally overwhelmed. That potential is there, and we want to do everything we can to not get to that point.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, your country's top infectious disease expert, told CNN he doesn't understand why all 50 states don't have these orders in place. South Dakota, your state, is one of 5 states who haven't done so. Why do you think that is?
Because our governor has also said that South Dakota isn't the same being out on the prairie like other parts of our country. And so we're getting conflicting reports. Our governor is very close with the president, being a former congresswoman. She had talked about in news conferences earlier this week and last week that she's been on the phone with the president. She's been on the phone with the vice president and Mr. Kushner. And in her opinion, we're not the same as the rest of the country.
And is that what you think is behind not putting that order in, or is there more to it in your opinion?
No, I think that's why we're trying to slow down everything. There's a conflict somewhere between our mayor and the governor not seeing things the same way. I think they're using 2 different modeling systems. I think they're looking at a different set of numbers. In South Dakota, we're primarily a very rural state of 850,000 people, but in the Sioux Falls MSA, we have about 250,000 people. So we are a good-sized urban area in comparison to a large part of our state that's very rural. And so trying to come up with a plan that serves a metropolitan area versus a rural area, I agree that there's probably a different way to do that. But that's why we're asking for this to be in a way that's more managed for what we're seeing on the ground with the people who are actually on the ground and have boots on the ground.
Your governor, Governor Noem, has said it's up to individuals, not the government, to decide whether, quote, to exercise their right to work, to worship, and to play, or to even stay at home. What do you make of that?
I couldn't disagree more. I agree that we have a rugged individualism as South Dakotans, but when it comes to public health, your rights under the United States Constitution, as my high school government teacher taught me, end at the end of my nose. And what I do when it affects someone else's rights and my right for me and my family to be safe and healthy, I think that we can disagree on that point that she has.
So tomorrow, you and your colleagues will consider a city council ordinance to keep people at home. Do you have the power to do that, and what will that do?
Well, I believe we do have the power. The hardest part is that this ordinance is being proposed by our mayor. We have a strong mayor form of government, home rule charter, where the city council is part-time and kind of intended to work 10 to 12 hours a week, and kind of a corporate board of directors type of policy-making body. So we are waiting for the mayor to have what's going to be in the ordinance, what the enforcement processes are, but we have to have that by 7 o'clock tonight to give the public notice before our meeting on Wednesday at 7 p.m.
And what about the people of Sioux Falls? Are they in favor of such an ordinance?
The calls that I'm getting overwhelmingly are to shelter in place. And the people that I'm primarily hearing from are people who have family members that are at risk, elderly parents, children, spouses, people who are really going to be at risk if they get infected with this virus, and it will be life-threatening for them. And those are the people who are really strongly interested in slowing this down as much as we can.
And so what concerns you the most? Should this ordinance not pass? Should things just continue on as normal and the number of cases in South Dakota quite possibly increases?
Well, and I think we're going to see that spread as a natural progression in this process anyway. What concerns me most is not being able to overload our healthcare system so that people can't be helped when they need that help. We're already at that point because we're limiting the amount of tests that we're doing. The state doesn't have enough testing equipment, and without being a panic, people need to take shelter in their homes. This is like a hurricane or a tornado that those of us on the plains are used to. You're getting plenty of warning. The warning siren needs to be going off now, that you need to do everything that you can to protect your family and to be ready to shelter in place for up to 3 weeks.
Councillor Starr, thank you for making time for us today.
Absolutely.
Bye now.
Bye.
Pat Starr is a city councilor in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That's where we reached him.